Well, there's more of a shakeup for the global economy today. Students are back on the streets protesting tuition hikes in the UK. Fears are rising that Ireland's bailout won't be the only one. And China and Russia have decided to quit the dollar. So what does it all mean? Well, here to discuss it with me is Archie's financial correspondent, Lauren Lister. Lauren, thanks for being here. Now, let's start, of course, with this announcement today, basically, that China and Russia said that they are renouncing the dollar, at least when it comes to bilateral trade deals. They're only going to use their own currencies. That sounds like kind of a big step. I mean, is this the first step, of a move away from the dollar as the reserve currency?
Well, it's really a continuation of something that we're seeing that absolutely does call into question the U.S. dollar as a reserve currency, according to many of the economists that I've been speaking to. I mean, this is something that countries have been doing for a while now. We've seen this happen in Brazil, where Brazil is kind of spearheading trade among Latin American countries in their own currencies, where we've seen China spearhead a lot of these deals, and the deal between China and Russia now is just one further example of countries circumventing the dollar and trading in their own currencies. Of course, the U.S. dollar is the reserve currency for a very long time. This was the only currency that people traded in. And so this is definitely a big shift, and it's a step away from really the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency. It could definitely affect the U.S.'s status as that. It's something that many people have been talking about for a while, but you're seeing more and more of these bilateral agreements. And of course, the U.S. being the reserve currency, I mean, that's what gives the U.S. the privilege to run these deficits, run up the debt, print money, inflate its way out of debt. Of course, the U.S. wants that privilege. I mean, it's one of the privileges of being the reserve currency, and it's something that you're seeing this shift away from. I mean, even I have economists that I talk to that say the U.S. dollar is becoming not the reserve currency, but the pariah currency that countries want to move away from. They don't want to be required to hold these large reserves of U.S. dollars because the U.S. is running up debt. So, it's kind of a continuation of this argument we've heard over currency wars, quantitative easing, and its impact on the rest of the world, and then the reactions that you're seeing from other countries that matter, emerging countries that have money to spend, that are growing economies, such as Russia, such as China, that are going a different course.
But then what do you say about yesterday's developments? Because, of course, we had tension between North and South Korea. You had Ireland's bailout. And so what happened is people started buying up U.S. treasuries. The dollar value went up. And so then a lot of people were saying, that's proof that if there's any kind of global uncertainty, people still run to the dollar.
Well, there's proof that the U.S. dollar is still the reserve currency. At the end of the day, that still is a situation. So anytime there's political unrest, like we saw in North and South Korea, or like you're pointing out in Ireland, yes, there's a flight to safety that continues, and that flight to safety is considered a flight to the U.S. dollar, because at the end of the day, it's still the reserve currency, it's still a convertible currency. The euro's obviously under pressure with what's going on in Ireland and that sort of thing. So you are going to see this as long as it is the reserve currency. Does that mean that
that's going to last? I guess
yeah. Does that mean that these other bilateral agreements, these other moves to circumvent the dollar, don't have an impact? No, absolutely not. I mean, this is a continuation of something that does matter and is a shift markedly in the world economy and politically.
Now, if I want to bring up Ireland, they announced that they're going to have an 85 billion euro bailout, and now there are a lot of fears sparking that Ireland isn't going to be the only country, that perhaps Spain, perhaps Portugal need to be bailed out as well. If it goes that far, then what's going to happen with the global economy? How will that affect it?
Well, I mean, if you're talking about specifically, let's start in Europe before we get to the global economy. I mean, Portugal is a very small economy. If they needed to be bailed out, the Eurozone would be able to support that with its fund, is what I'm told by people that study it and work in this field. Spain is a different situation. Spain is the 5th largest economy in Europe. It's the 9th largest economy in the world. If Spain was facing a situation like that, the Eurozone wouldn't be able to bail them out. Spain may face default. If that was a situation, they couldn't stay in the Eurozone. So all of this threatens the Eurozone, which then threatens the euro. We've seen the euro take a dive on this news. And what it all amounts to when you look at the bigger picture is that these are countries, and this is a block, an economic block, that fuels exports from the U.S., exports from China. So if you see a decay there, if you see a breakdown there in these situations where a country like Spain faced default, that would absolutely have an impact on the broader global economy with, China and the U.S. and other countries that rely on the Eurozone for their exports.
Well, one of the interesting things is the U.S. is no stranger to essentially an economic crisis at the moment itself, but the contrast is so stark from what we see here and from what you saw on the streets, during the NATO summit in Lisbon.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The difference, I mean, you have countries in Europe that are making tough decisions with austerity because they have to. They're all on the euro. They don't have the ability to influence their currency, influence the valuation of it, because they're all on the euro. They can't do what the U.S. does with the dollar and just print more money in order to have the effect that they want to, you know, run up their debt and to deal with their problems and the spending that they need. So you have two really different situations, and you see people on the streets in Europe in a way that you don't in the United States, even though everybody's facing, you know, financial hardship. The U.S. is definitely not out of the boat. I mean, unemployment is high. We are running up the debt, and yet you don't see people's lives affected to the extent because the U.S. hasn't had to take these austerity measures. In Europe, where you see them, you know, making these tough choices, making these tough cuts, you see people on the streets, you see activism surrounding it because it's affecting their lives,
yes.
and you know, it's affecting their lives directly. And so they notice something like my country's continuing to, you know, maintain funding to NATO to finance these wars in Afghanistan and these other missions, when we want this money to be spent on social services that we are facing cuts because of our government's financial problems, whereas the U.S. isn't in that situation. It doesn't affect people's lives directly.
It's definitely a different picture on the streets, but not financially. Lauren, thanks so much.
Thank you.